All right, so this question is clearly testing transition words. And hopefully from experience, we know that transition questions are kind of a big exception on the SAT writing. They are the only ideas question that doesn't have an actual question. So that means we're not really looking for any sort of grammar rule here or picking a choice just because it sounds good. We need to think about the ideas in the sentence before the transition word and the sentence that contains the transition word and kind of see how they relate. So the best way to do that, anything with ideas, is to keep it simple, right? Use dumb summaries to start. We can always get more advanced after you've eliminated some bad answers. So let's look at the connotations of these two sentences first. First one says, Greek yogurt is slightly lower in sugar and carbohydrates than conventional yogurt is. Well, that's a good thing, right? Lower in sugar, lower in carbs. If you're trying to stay healthy, stay in a diet, those are things you usually want to keep low. So that's positive. Second sentence, because it is more concentrated, Greek yogurt contains slightly more protein per serving, thereby helping people stay satiated for longer periods of time. Well, that's also positive, right? So more protein, less sugar, all good stuff. So they're both positive sentences. Now, there aren't really any choices that are a contrast. And so this is another piece of the transition process here is we want to make sure not only do we understand the sentences in the simplest way possible, but that we also understand these transition words in the simplest way possible. Some of them are obvious, like also. We know that word, right? It's basically the same as and. But these other ones, maybe are a little trickier. Therefore sounds very advanced to us, but it's basically a complicated way of saying so, right? It's a because, a cause and effect word. In other words, well, that one is kind of straightforward. Now, ask yourself, is the second sentence the first sentence in other words? Is it just restating the same idea? No, it's a new idea, right? There's a difference between something being low in sugar and high in protein. Those are different facts. They're not the same fact repeated. So be literal here. This one just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't match with what's being said. The same thing with D, right? For instance, we know what that phrase means. It has to do with examples. And the second thing is not an example of the first thing. They're two separate facts about the nutrition of Greek yogurt. And so this is where I think the dumb summary really helps us. If we understand that the word therefore is basically a so, we can just kind of substitute that in. Greek yogurt is slightly lower in sugar and carbohydrates than conventional yogurt is. So, because it is more concentrated, Greek yogurt contains slightly more protein per serving. Well, it doesn't have the high protein because it has the low sugar and carbs. Again, those are separate facts. They're not being connected to each other in a tight way. And so we don't want this kind of tight transition word, something like so, which is going to add some meaning here. We want to keep these things separate. So the correct transition is really not a transition at all. It's just telling us we're moving on to something new. It's kind of related, but it's totally separate. These are not facts that are dependent upon each other. And that happens sometimes. And I think with transition questions, we are lured in to these kind of fancier transition words because we think that they sound smart. And what dumb summaries let us do is they remind us that these smart words have kind of traditional, simple meanings. And we really want to understand the simplicity to make sure that we're not adding something to the paragraph that isn't there. In my study guide, I have a chart that kind of links all of these transition words with the more simple version. I think that's really helpful. But the more of these that you do, the more you'll notice that the simple versions are usually enough to get the question right. So try to memorize them and think of them in that way.